when I graduated in 1968, I could try a case in front of a jury by license, but I couldn't sit on the jury because women were still not allowed to sit on South Carolina juries.
So the woman who would become the highest jurist in the state could not serve on a jury the year she graduated law school because of her gender. But gender issues didn't stop Jean Toal. After law school, she began as an associate at a Greenville-based law firm before moving back to Columbia. In 1975, she was elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives. Then in 1988, to the state Supreme Court. And for 15 years, she was Chief Justice, the first and only woman Chief Justice in South Carolina, and the state's longest-serving Chief Justice. Take us back for a moment. Women are attorneys, women are in professions, managers. Why weren't women afforded those responsibilities in those years?
You know, you can go back to what the United States Supreme Court said in an early case that Myra Bradwell brought to be allowed to practice law as a woman. And the court basically said that the law is too rough and polluting a place. We must put women on a pedestal. And it was that theme of domesticity that supposedly protect women, but in essence, it restrained women from joining as full citizens. Remember that women were allowed to vote in the United States until 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. So women's place as equal participants in society was very slow in coming.
Did you feel, in a sense, you were paving the way for future women by everything that you did because you were the first in so many respects?
You know, when you take a breath and step back for a moment, of course, and early on I decided that I needed to be sure that as I achieved some prominence and broke barriers, that I reached down and pulled my sisters along. It is a very typical thing for people who are in a minority to hold dearly the achievements that they make and be a little afraid sometimes to have others come because they may not be able to get what they got as the one. I had a saying that the South Carolina women lawyers have used as a motto and as an emblem for the pin we all wear, and there are now many thousands of us
with
that
the
are
ladder.
Women lawyers. It's a ladder, and it has a little Carolina wren climbing up the ladder, and it's based on what they call the Toal principle, which is if you get a little something, leave the ladder down and pull your sisters up the ladder with you. And I felt that keenly.
And she continues extending the ladder and mentoring young women today. Throughout her service on the court, Jean Toal has worked to open the system to citizens.
My big goal was to try to make the system more accessible to people who lived in small and rural areas, to make their court system more accessible and the information in government records more accessible. And we were, as usual in South Carolina, in a tight money situation. Most of the records were still maintained on paper. You could not access them except during hours that clerks of courts offices were open in the capital of the county. And so I came up with the idea of automating records, but not using the very expensive mainframe computers that were how business and government automated in 2000 when I became chief, but using what was a fairly new platform called the Internet that was basically used in education but not much used by government or by business to archive and make accessible their records. So I went to see Fritz Hollings and I said, Senator, I've got this idea that South Carolina, a pretty poor state, could be a pilot for the use of the Internet as a means of automating court records and making them more accessible. And we had a long discussion about this, and he finally said, Gene, I'm going to try to get you some money to start this project as a pilot. But what I want to know as soon as you develop your plan, is what impact will it have on rural South Carolina? So that's where we started, not with the low-hanging fruit and automating the Supreme Court, but down in the magistrates' courts, the basic courts that were in every hamlet and every place.
And did it have that impact?
It did. We automated those records with a lot of effort and begging telephone companies and getting high-speed internet access when they had none, but the bottom line was we automated all of them.
Was there a turning point in your life that you think led to your success?
I gauged the confidence I had to begin this long journey from my childhood. Brown versus the Board of Education was decided when I was 10 years old. And my family was a typical Southern family. My father was a typical Southern businessman. My mother was a typical Southern mother. But we were Catholic, and we knew something about discrimination. And we had a little different idea as a family, as did our church, about equal opportunity for all people. And when that decision was made, and I started reading, I was a voracious reader, and I read the newspapers and all the accounts, and saw some of the things that were said by Southerners about black people. I said, we can't live like this. And my heart as a very young child was turned in a different way. When I was in high school, an outreach was made to a few white children and a few black children of high school age to meet in an interfaith group at the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA in segregated Columbia, South Carolina, to start talking about how we could work together to open up opportunity and open up voting for all people. And I participated in that, and those lessons really gave me the fervor for trying to do something to change my beloved state and my beloved South Carolina, the South, and make it a place of equal opportunity. And that's really been a driving force personally for most of my life.
And one final question about women today. There have been so many changes over the last 4 or 5 decades. Where do we stand now? Where do women stand today?
Our voice is much more heard and much more respected, but there are still old-fashioned attitudes out there. I think we have to understand that we can exist in so many different roles and live so many different kinds of lives, and we've got to respect the way others live their lives just as we have to respect the way we do as well. I think that's very important. There's not one way to quote-unquote make it as a woman, and I think for a while we got in that mode that, hey, if you aren't moving in this particular direction, if you're not in the world of work, or you're not in the world of politics, or you're not in some other kind of role, then you as a woman are not achieving what you ought to achieve. We need to get over that. Gosh, when I look at some of the young people who are really making a difference in the public discourse in this country right now, they come from every kind of background and every kind of way of existing as adults.